In the courtroom, a judge arrogantly passes judgment, unaware that the black woman he's belittling is the new Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Her next move will stun even the most seasoned observers. But let's start from the beginning. Early in the morning, Carla Johnson, dressed in a modest dark navy suit, stepped through the heavy doors of the Blackstone County Courthouse. The high ceilings, adorned with intricate, vintage plasterwork, cast long shadows, creating an atmosphere of solemnity. But for Carla, entering this building for the first time as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, it felt cold and unfamiliar. Without the usual entourage of security and assistants befitting her new rank, Carla chose to arrive alone, aiming to remain inconspicuous. Blending in with the crowd of lawyers and their clients waiting for their cases to be called, Carla drew only fleeting glances. Her confident posture stood out, but no one suspected that this composed woman held such a prestigious position. She intended to observe the court system from within, starting with a routine courtroom session presided over by Judge Richard Patterson. Judge Patterson, a white-haired man in his mid-60s, was known for his brusque demeanor and intolerance for what he called emotional outbursts. His approach to trials resembled military drills, precise, rigid, and devoid of warmth. When his eyes fell on Carla, seated discreetly at the back of the courtroom, his gaze lingered longer than usual. A woman with such poise yet dressed modestly caught his attention. Squinting slightly, he seemed puzzled by her presence. "Young lady," his booming voice cut through the courtroom chatter. "Are you sure you understand how things work in this courtroom? This isn't a school play or a drama club." Heads turned to look at Carla. Remaining calm, she nodded slightly and responded with dignity. "I'm quite sure, Your Honor. Thank you for your concern." Patterson scoffed and turned away. His tone and demeanor were openly dismissive, leading Carla to wonder how often this man judged people not by the law, but by their appearance or social standing. When the session began, Carla sat quietly among the spectators. The case involved a black man accused of petty theft, a charge he denied. Carla noticed immediately that whenever the defense attorney raised issues of potential police bias, Judge Patterson's irritation became palpable. "We're not here to discuss sociology," he interrupted sharply. "We're here to discuss evidence. Stick to the facts." With every comment from the judge, Carla saw more of his bias. He spoke to the prosecutor with surprising leniency, but the defense attorney had to defend every word under Patterson's intense and skeptical glare. At the end of the session, Patterson imposed the harshest possible sentence, justifying it as upholding the principles of fairness and order. After the morning session ended, Carla found an opportunity to approach Judge Patterson. She caught him in the hallway, adjusting his robe before the next hearing. "Your Honor," she began politely, "may I ask you a few questions?" Patterson looked her over, arms crossed over his chest. "If it's about the law and not emotions, I'm listening," he replied curtly. Carla continued, her tone measured and diplomatic. "I noticed that you place significant emphasis on evidence, but how do you address systemic discrimination when it arises in a case?" "Personal feelings and racial issues have no place in court," Patterson retorted. "We're guided solely by the law here." His indifferent response only strengthened Carla's resolve. She realized that justice in a courtroom depended not just on the law, but also on those interpreting it. At the next session, Judge Patterson presided over a case involving a young black woman accused of selling expired food on the street. The prosecutor was relentless, painting her as a public safety threat. Carla watched as the defense attorney attempted to explain that the woman was in a desperate situation, merely trying to survive. Patterson interrupted. "That's no excuse for breaking the law. Everyone is responsible for knowing their duties." The judge handed down a fine that the woman could never afford, and several months of community service. Carla was stunned. The sentence ignored mitigating circumstances and felt outright unjust. After the session, Carla approached the defendant's mother, who stood in the hallway embracing her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for speaking in the courtroom." the mother whispered to Carla. But the system doesn't care about people like us. A chill ran through Carla. She knew she had to act, but understood the need to proceed carefully. Before revealing her identity, she resolved to assess the overall situation in the courthouse. She decided to reach out to trusted colleagues who could help initiate an independent review of Judge Patterson's rulings. A judge must remember that the law is not just about its letter, but its spirit of fairness, Carla thought as she exited the courthouse, determined to fight for change. The next day, Carla returned to the courthouse, this time choosing a different courtroom to continue her observations. This session involved an assault case where the defendant, a black teenager, claimed he acted in self-defense. The prosecutor, a middle-aged white man, delivered harsh accusations, laced with thinly veiled racial stereotypes that filled Carla with anger and dismay. This young man was armed and aggressive, just like so many others from his neighborhood, the prosecutor declared. He's an obvious threat to our community. Carla focused on Judge Patterson, who made no effort to curtail the prosecutor's language. Instead, when the defense attorney objected, citing the prosecutor's bias, Patterson interrupted. Let's not turn this case into a political arena. We're here to examine facts, not debate social issues. Carla quietly took notes. Her notebook was now filled with examples of blatant bias and disregard for basic principles of justice. She realized the situation was worse than she'd anticipated and that swift action was needed. After the hearing, Carla stayed behind to discuss her observations with a defense attorney. In the hallway, she spoke in a low voice. The judge is clearly showing bias. This is unacceptable. His cases, especially those involving racial discrimination, need to be reviewed. Unbeknownst to her, Judge Patterson overheard the conversation. Turning sharply, he intervened, his irritation evident. If you think you understand the court better than I do, why aren't you sitting on the bench? Carla met his gaze steadily, her voice calm but firm. Perhaps that's only a matter of time, Your Honor. Her words left Patterson momentarily speechless. He stared at her for a long moment before walking away, muttering under his breath. Carla realized her presence was no longer unnoticed, and whispers began circulating through the courthouse. Who was this enigmatic woman boldly challenging the judge? A few days later, a significant hearing was scheduled at the courthouse. Carla decided it was time to reveal her identity. She arrived accompanied by members of the press and colleagues from the Supreme Court. Dressed in her formal robe, she exuded authority and confidence. Courthouse staff turned their heads in surprise as Carla walked down the corridor toward Judge Patterson's courtroom. When she entered, the room fell silent. At first, Patterson didn't notice her, but when his eyes landed on Carla, his expression turned to shock. Taking the floor, Carla addressed the courtroom. Judge Patterson, I am the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Over the past week, I've observed your work in this court. Gasps echoed through the room. Patterson attempted to respond, but Carla continued. Your conduct raises serious concerns about your professionalism and ability to remain impartial. You have allowed prosecutors to use language rooted in stereotypes and failed to show sensitivity to systemic discrimination. Every moment was captured by the media, including Patterson's faltering attempts to defend himself. His words sounded hollow, as Carla, maintaining her composure, declared, I am ordering a review of the cases you have presided over and initiating an investigation into your conduct. The justice system must serve everyone equally, regardless of race or social status. Patterson looked crushed. He struggled to find a response, realizing his career was now under threat. After the session, Carla approached the mother of the defendant from the first case she'd observed. The woman, eyes filled with gratitude, said, Now we have hope. Carla smiled, but she knew the battle had only just begun. Transforming a broken system would be a long and challenging journey. With a renewed sense of purpose, she left the courthouse, ready to fight for those who had suffered too long under the weight of injustice.